Okay, Exile chapter 11. Come, friend. The strange whisper dragged Sophie back to consciousness, and she was grateful for it. Brant's scared, twisted face had joined her nightmares, and she could practically feel him pinning her against the chair. But instead of taking her pin, he took her hand as he laughed and screamed, "Mine!" At least she'd figured out why he said he'd seen her before. She must have reminded him of Julie, which felt strange. "Come, friend." Sophie shook her head, realizing where the whispers were coming from. "Sylvanir?" "Friend!" the alicorn replied, louder this time, and mixed with a rush of excitement. Sophie stumbled to her feet, knocking Iggy to the floor with a startled squeak. "Sorry," she whispered as he shook his paws at her, making his pink curls bounce. Sophie grabbed the first pants and tunic she found and threw them on, but couldn't tie the shirt sash. Her hands were shaking too hard. How could she hear Sylvanie if she wasn't listening for her? The day before, she amused Sylvanie's emotions had been so intense that it had made her subconsciously open up her mind. But now each replention pounded into her brain like a stone. When she tried to shield, all it did was muffle the noise. "Come, friend, come, friend, come, friend, come, friend, come, friend." "What's wrong, Miss Foster?" Sandor asked as she hopped out of her bedroom door, still putting on her other boots. "I don't know," she admitted, beelining for the stairs. Adeline sat at the table in the dimly lit kitchen, her shadowed eyes looking like she hadn't slept at all. She jumped when Sophie rushed towards the door, nearly spilling her tea. "Are you okay?" Sophie slipped outside, racing towards Sylvanie's pasture. Sandor caught up with her, grabbing her arm to stop her. "You really love to make my job difficult, don't you?" he asked as he scanned the scenery. "Sorry, I'm just trying to check on Sylvanie." Sandor sighed and drew his weapon. "Stay behind me." He moved slow and soldier-like as he led her forward, trying to keep his eyes on everything at once. But when Sylvanie's enclosure came into view, the glittering horse was alone, circling the highest part of her dome, still transporting "Come, friend!" over and over. As soon as she spotted Sophie, she swooped down and trotted to the bars, shoving her nose through and snuffling. Sophie gagged. Alicorn morning breath almost rivaled Iggy breath. "What's wrong, girl?" Sophie asked as Sandor put his weapon away. Cold emptiness rushed through her mind, sinking into her heart. "You're lonely?" she asked. "Lonely," Sylvanie repeated. "Friend." "Everything okay?" Grady called, jogging up behind them. His hair was tousled, and he was wearing something that looked part bathrobe, part trench coat, which made Sophie realize how early it was. The sun was just beginning to streak the purple sky with hints of orange and pink. "Did something happen?" he asked. "No, everything's fine. Sylvanie was just calling me. She can transmit right into my brain somehow, and I can't block her." How is that possible? I have no idea. He yawned, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. I guess you have to ask Tyrion about it when Foxfire starts. Sophie nodded, trying to stay as calm as Grady, but she didn't feel like feeling other voices in her head. It was worrying enough that Fitz could do it. Now Sylvanie could too. Wasn't her mind designed to be impenetrable? How are you doing this? She transmitted, stroking Sylvanie's velvety nose. Friend lonely, was the only reply. Sophie sighed. Do you think we should move her to the sanctuary so she can be with the other at Alicorn? She's already on a vegetarian diet. Readying a creature for relocation takes much more than changing what they eat. They need to be so well adjusted to captivity that they will no longer desire to leave. Plus, the sanctuary is a very delicate ecosystem. Introducing an animal too early could destroy the careful balance we work so hard to maintain. We need to test her to make sure she's not carrying any diseases, and we need to make sure she isn't aggressive with other animals. And most important, she needs to be willing to trust people other than you. Grady stepped closer, and Sylvanie reared back. Sophie frowned. Sylvanie had let the Heeks get close to her, though that had possibly made it worse, since they'd restrained her in that terrible harness. Sorry, girl, Sophie said, rubbing Sylvanie's cheeks. You'll have to stay with me for a little while longer. A new feeling poured into Sophie's mind, one that made her feet itch to run. I think she's restless. Maybe we need to let her out of the enclosure. Sylvanie whinnied like she agreed. Grady shook his head. We can't risk that. She'll fly away. I don't think she will. We still can't chance it. The council has trusted you, trusted us with a tremendous responsibility by leaving Sylvanie in our care. She's incredibly important to our world. Sophie stroked Sylvanie's chin. I just hate seeing her locked up. Almost as much as she hated Sylvanie instinctively transmissions. Sylvanie, please quiet. She tried to think of an image to explain silence. But how did a picture convey the absence of sound? It didn't matter. Sylvanie was instant, stamping her hooves, transmitting her commands. We have to do something to calm her down. She's given me a migraine. Why don't you go in the enclosure with her? Sophie doubted it would be enough, but it was better than nothing. Treat? She asked Sylvanie as she grabbed a fistful of swizzle spice from the nearby pile. She threw stalks as far as she could when Sylvanie trotted after them. Grady unlocked the gate, and she rushed inside. By the time the distracted horse realized what happened, the gate was safely latched again. Now what? Sophie whispered as Sylvanie eyed her, sniffing the air for treats. You're the one who has the special connection to her. Yes, but having a connection didn't mean she knew how to entertain a large, glittery horse. She couldn't exactly play fetch. She settled for calling Sylvanie to her side and rubbing her shimmering fur until her mood mellowed. It's so strange that you could use your telepathy on her, Grady murmured. I just tried mesmerizing her, and it had no effect at all. I wonder what they did do to your mind to make it work that way." Sophie cringed. "Sorry, I didn't mean it like that." "It's okay. I know I'm a freak." "You're not a freak, Sophie." "Come on, everyone thinks it." "Not me." "Right, sure." She pulled her hair around her face, wishing she could hide. "I know, it's hard." "Do you?" Sylvanie whinnied at the shouted question, and Sophie reached for her. "Sorry, calm." "Calm," Sylvanie repeated, filling Sophie's mind with warmth again. "I do," Grady said quietly, and the sadness in his tone made Sophie turn to look at him. It's not exactly easy being a mesmer. Now he had her attention. When she'd first met Grady, he went out of his way to avoid telling her what his ability was. But she thought that because the council was always pressuring him about it, not because they didn't like it. Kids at school didn't trust me after I manifested. Told me they didn't want me messing with their minds. Others would lie to get out of detention and say I made them do whatever they got caught doing. And when I got awards or praise, they'd come. I used my ability to cheat. Claim I used my ability to cheat. Even Adeline's parents teased me when we got engaged. They said they should find a way to make sure I hadn't mesmered her into marrying me. They meant it as a joke, but Sophie felt the same way when people teased her about Inflictor, even when they were just having fun. Being powerful worries people, Sophie. It's unfair and hurts. But can't you understand why it happens? She kicked the ground. She could. But that didn't mean she liked it. You've had a huge burden dumped on you. Trust me, no one understands the same thing my parents told me when I would get so angry I wanted to throw stuff. They'd say, someday your ability will do big things, and the world will be grateful we have you. The words should have been comforting, and they were, except what if she really was someone's puppet? Could she be programmed to do certain things? Bad things? So, do you think Sylvanie will let you sit on her back? Grady asked. Huh? If you're going to be working with her, you're going to need to learn how to ride her. Sophie had a feeling he was just trying to distract her and cheer her up, but it would be fun to ride an alicorn. Then again, she was suddenly realizing how very large Sylvanie was and how very high off the ground her back was. How do I even get up there? Can you get her to kneel down? Maybe. Kneel, she transmitted, sending Sylvanie an image of the position she met. She had to repeat it 3 times before Sylvanie lowered her head and bent her front legs. Amazing. Now just make sure she's calm and climb on. Sophie stared at the crouched horse. What if I fall? We have Elwyn on standby. Very funny. Come on, aren't you always saying we worry too much and never let you take any risks? Well, here's your risk. It was strange to have Grady so relaxed about her safety. though he did regularly ride around on myths and dinosaurs. So this wasn't exactly out of the ordinary, but he never had her do those things. Of course, Sylvanie was a glittering winged horse, not a Tyrannosaurus Rex, so she sucked in a breath for extra courage. Sent Sylvanie images of what she was about to do, and slowly stretched one leg over the horse's neck. Sylvanie raised her head as she straightened, sliding Sophie down to the dip in her back, just behind her wings. Fly? Sylvanie asked, and before Sophie could respond, the excited horse flapped her enormous wings and launched into the sky. Sophie screamed as the wisping wind made her eyes water. Grady shouted things like, "Squeeze your legs!" and "Wrap your arms around Sylvanie's neck." But those required moving. Moving was going to be possible. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few seconds, Sophie managed to get a white-knuckled grip on Sylvanie's mane, coiling the ends around her wrists for extra support. With her panic at a slightly more manageable level, she realized they were circling the top of the domed enclosure. Sylvanie was flying low enough to avoid the thick purple bars, but Sophie ducked anyway. "Here, Sylvanie," Grady called, running into the enclosure and holding out a handful of swizzle spice. "Come down for a treat." Sylvanie ignored him. Apparently, terrifying her only friend was better than snacks. "Order her to land," Sandor called. "Working on it," Sophie shouted back. She took a deep breath, forcing her mind to relax as she transmitted images of them standing on the ground. Down. Sylvanie nickered. "Fly!" Down. "Fly! Down! Fly! Down! Fly!" Sylvanie's mood turned giddy over this new game, and Sophie wondered just how much trouble she'd be in if she strangled the obnoxious horse once they were back on solid ground. Sylvanie veered to the left, sending Sophie falling right. Grady and Sandor gasped, but before Sophie lost her balance, Sylvanie's wing tipped her back onto place. When the same thing happened 3 more times, Sophie realized what Sylvanie was trying to tell her. "You want me to trust you?" "Trust," Sylvanie repeated, though Sophie wondered if she really grasped the concept, especially since she started flying faster, with more twists and turns, than any roller coaster could ever have. "Easy," she ordered, sending images of straight, slow flying. "Don't panic, Sophie," Grady called. "I'm going to get you down." Sophie glanced below, where a group of gnomes had entered the enclosure and were helping him uncoil a thick silver lasso. "Don't!" she screamed, imaging Sylvanie turning bucking bronco in the air. "It's okay. I know what I'm doing." Somehow she doubted that. "I could get her to come down on my own." "You've got 1 more minute," he shouted back. "Then I'm dragging you down." Being hogtied to a terrified alicorn and yanked from the sky was definitely not on Sophie's things "I want to do" list. "Sylvanie, please take me down." She transmitted more images of her standing on the ground, all of which Sylvanie ignored. Sophie said, trying a different tactic. But Sylvanie didn't seem to understand the concept, flapping them in a series of loops. "Hang on," Grady called, and Sophie heard the unmistakable swish of a rope slicing through the air. "Take us down!" The transmission mixed with so much fear and panic, it felt like a cold blast when it left her mind. Sylvanie screeched, tucked her wings, and dropped from the sky like a missile. Sophie squealed and braced for an impact, but the last possible second, Sylvanie leveled off and touched down. Stopping so abruptly, it sent Sophie tumbling forward. By some miracle, she managed to land on her feet, but her legs were shaking, and her head was spinning so fast, she stumbled and collapsed right into a pile of alicorn manure. That's the end of chapter 11. Keep on listening and find out what happens.